Time to talk basketball. I'm Jose Salviati, editor at thepeachbasket.net. He's Steve Purciello, longtime educator, vice principal, high school basketball coach, and athletic director. And this is the Shot Clock Pod, the best 15 minutes of random NBA thoughts online anywhere. If this is your first time listening, welcome. We're glad you found us. This podcast was born out of the content in Steve's Searching Rules Random NBA Thoughts articles, which he publishes weekly. Steve and I have exactly 15 minutes to discuss what's on his mind around the NBA. Today, we'll discuss his latest 13 Rules Random NBA Thoughts article, where he shares his thoughts after the end of the 2024-25 NBA season. Hard to believe the season is over. The playoffs are here. Steve, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do it. Starting the timer now. All right. You started your article talking about one of the best players in NBA history, Kevin Durant. He's closer to the end of his career than the start, but he's had a tumultuous career. You elaborate in your article. But let me ask you this. How do you think he'll be remembered, and which team that he played for, he's played for several, is most likely to retire his number, if any?
The only team that would retire it would be Oklahoma. And I think the only way that would happen is if he goes back there, if he gets traded back or something along that line. The other teams, he was a mercenary going to Golden State. He smelled the championship because he jumped on the bandwagon and won. He played well in those games, but then he became a free agent and went to the Nets. Things got a little hot over there, so then he wanted out, and he ended up in Phoenix. Phoenix is a walking disaster. So, it's been a career where people who watch him play realize what a great offensive player he is, what a tremendous shooter, unstoppable. But they also realize he didn't have a place he called home. There is none. People wouldn't even remember, as I said in the article, that Seattle, of all teams, they drafted him. That's how a lot of younger people don't even know who Seattle is until the next Seattle comes along. And he played in Oklahoma City. People don't even quite realize that. And he got himself out of there like he's done so many times. And that's part of the allure. But the problem with the statue in front of a building, he's worthy of it. He's one of the greatest.
Yeah.
Put it. He had his house. There's no place to put the statue. That's the best way to sum up Durant. And it's really a shame that he is. But what's really interesting, one more piece to it. He responds to any criticism on the Twitter or anything else of him. So it indicates he's a really sensitive, insecure man. And it's really a shame because he's just such a great offensive player.
Yeah, one of the best to do it. I don't think of him as a 7-footer, but I've heard other people describe him as a 7-footer. And then he's got those long arms and that shot that's just, he shoots from up top. It's unblockable. He's phenomenal and pretty durable. He's certainly been injured later in his career, but I'm looking at the start of his career, 80 games, 82 games, 81 games, 81 games. This is a guy who did it right. But the only thing, and you call this on your article, the thing he'll most likely be remembered for is not having that consistency, not having that whole chasing a championship, which to his credit he got. But tough to see. And then we'll see where he ends up because he's not going to be wearing a Suns jersey next year, is he?
No, God, no. God only knows what happens, but that's officially declared a disaster area. So there's not a chance. They've got to just start over. And it's not about amassing stars. It's about amassing people that can play together with a coach, trust you enough, and you can work with.
Yeah. This is as good a segue as any, right? You said the Suns are a mess. You called out 3 teams specifically that seem to be stuck in permanent decline. These are teams that just cannot seem to get over the hump. And these are some teams with great legacies, right? The Chicago Bulls, 6 championships for the franchise, but recently just haven't been that good. Sacramento Kings, great team, great excitement in Sacramento just as early as a couple of seasons ago, but stuck in permanent decline now. And the Atlanta Hawks. So which team out of those 3, the Bulls, the Kings, the Hawks, do you think has the best path forward, if any?
I think Atlanta does because they do have resources. Jalen's been hurt. They have Dyson Daniels, who's a tremendous defender, and Trae.
Yeah.
They need a little bit more around the edges, but there's a couple things. One of the things these teams have in common that I wanted to mention None of them like to go over the tax and pay the tax. They all want the money coming back to them. So it's going to limit them with any more experienced player. That's why they traded Bogdanovich and DeAndre Hunter, because until you have ownership that is ready to commit and willing to spend, you're not going to. Because if you look at the Hawks, with those four guys I mentioned, Okoro, who's a nice player, and so on, if they get one more guy that can score consistently, because Jalen Johnson and Reece O'Shea are going to get better and better offensively, they can be dangerous. But there's one more piece I just want to. The modern NBA talks about playing defense and that you need 5 defenders on the court. Trae Young doesn't allow that. So that's part of the situation for the Hawks. They need to decide, can they win by dealing him and picking up a couple pieces, or can they win with a 6'1" point guard who basically struggles to defend when he's interested in defending? So that kind of is the best way to sum up the situation. The other thing, does he get enough points? Does he score enough to be a 35 to 40-minute player a game? No, I don't know about that. And that's another piece to it that's got to be examined, because your 2 guard is usually your shooter. And you know, he's a little short of that. And Reece O'Shea won't become a good player for another couple of years. He will be, but he won't. So you still don't have that offensive firepower that you would want.
Yeah, the thing about Dyson Daniels, greatest nickname in the history of, at least this season in the NBA, the Great Barrier Thief. I love that nickname. We glossed over the Bulls.
I wanted to mention.
Go ahead, because they got a good, exciting young player there, I think.
Oh, it was, as I said in the article, they talk about you do the same thing every day. It's insanity and so on, and you expect change. The Bulls are the NBA's version of insanity, because they're doing the same thing every year. And they're going, no, they've got to sit down. And what do they want? And they do have a good coach. And Billy Donovan was smart enough to open it up and run and shoot, because they're not good defenders. Your center, who can score with any center just about, Vucevic, there's no rim protection here. And defense has fallen out the window for them. And they traded Zach LaVine, who was a good offensive player, but there was a lot of issues there. So what the heck are you doing here? And if you're going to keep those guys, the only reason you came in 10th or 9th or whatever was because the rest of the other 5 teams at the bottom were all tanking. And they all wanted to get the draft pick. They really, in fact, they got worse this year. And they really dropped the ball. They stunk it out against the Heat the other night. They really couldn't score. They couldn't put anything together the whole night. Just a terrible game. I don't see it. And what's amazing to me, if I ever came back and worked again, which I'm too old for that, but if I ever did, I'd want to work for the Chicago Bulls owners, Jerry Reinsdorf. He doesn't fire people. He doesn't fire anybody. He has to work 20 years there, and finally he might realize, hey, we're not winning, so now I'm going to get rid of some people. He did it in baseball with the White Sox. He finally fired his president of the team. And with the Bulls, he had Paxson and running the team for many years, finally got rid of him. Now he's had Kardashevis for about 5 years. Nothing's changed. So I don't quite get that one either.
Okay. Interesting to me, before we go to the next topic, that we didn't even get to the Kings, which is very sad. The Light the Beam team is too old, and I don't think they have a path forward. So, yeah, that's a team you got to blow up.
There's a thread in this. And there's also a thread when we talk about New Orleans. Poor ownership. Secret that teams that win have good ownership. And these teams that we're talking about, and Vivek Ranadive, he's crazy. He fires people in very short times. He goes through coaches and general managers. He just hired Scott Perry after firing Monty McNair. So he does this, and there's no stability. There's no idea. Here's what we're building. He had Vlade Divac, who probably has the same qualifications as I do to run a team, which is not much. And Divac brought him nowhere. And now I hear he's listening to Divac. What are we doing here? Are you finding all the bad things and bringing them back? Maybe he's going to hire Rick Pitino next time. It's crazy.
All right. I appreciate the shout out to the Laker great Vlade Divac, but let's leave that aside, because I don't want to go deeper down that rabbit hole. I feel for the Sacramento Kings.
The Lakers because of who he got traded for.
Shaquille O'Neal.
No, I believe it was your friend.
Oh, or was it Kobe? It was one of the two.
By the way,
Well,
we almost made it through a show without mentioning the Lakers. Almost. We
that
got
was on me. That was on me. I'm
who else is
sorry.
new? Let's go.
We
Go on.
talked about this already, but let's elaborate just a little bit because you called this out. You said the Hawks, it might be time to trade Trae Young. This is a player who led the association in assists, a great nickname too. This is a franchise player. Why do you think they should move on from him?
If you're not going to pay, and if you're not going to pay the big bucks to go over the tax, you've got to think about getting younger players and hoping they develop while you're paying them less money. Young will command a lot of money in the next contract. And that's a big decision they do have to make. They had a choice last year with DeJounte Murray or Young, and they made a choice in Young. Look where it got them.
Yeah.
That's something that you can get 2 or 3 players for what you're paying Young, and younger
Yeah.
hopes bears fruit. And naturally, hopefully they can defend a bit.
It's interesting hearing you say that because I know you're a baseball fan too. And it reminded me, I think it was the 80s. Nolan Ryan was pitching for the California at the time, California Angels, and was phenomenal. Here's Nolan Ryan, but they let him go. He was 16 and 14 the year they let him go. And nobody understood why. 16 and 14 today gets you $500 million a year. But back then it was very mid. But the GM of the Angels said to people listening at the time, he said, listen, I got to get 2, 8, and 7 pitches to replace him. Done. No big deal. And what you just said, for the money that you get Trae, you're going to get you can get 2 players. But the Angels never got 2, 8, and 7 pitches. They never replaced Nolan Ryan. You got to be real careful about who you bring in, because getting 2 players, yeah, but are they the right players? And we've talked about having the right players on your team. So it's a tough decision for the Hawks, but I think you're right. I think it's time to make it. Let's move on. Last topic. We got a couple minutes. David Griffin is out. Joe Dumars is in. Now, New Orleans, another team. You didn't list them in your team of problem franchises, but you could have. First big decision for Joe is what to do with Zion Williamson. What do you see in Zion's future in New Orleans?
That's Gail Benson is the owner. She's the wife of Tom Benson, I believe.
Tom Benson, yeah.
who-
On the Saints.
That's right. And he actually bought the Pelicans years ago because there was talk of moving him out of town. So they kept him there. And they continue. But that's always, in New Orleans, football's king. It's actually she country and football's everything. Football's not, if you've ever been, and I have been in that arena, I've been to a few arenas now, and it's not a great place. It's next to the stadium, the football stadium, which makes it look like a little nothing, but the Superdome. But the point being, they could use a new arena, which isn't going to happen. It's in downtown New Orleans. And the other part of it is he's not really into this, so she's not going to pay the money. Again, they're not going to. Now, they've got to make some decisions with Zion. And if you look at the economics of it, you're paying a guy a lot of money for 30 or 40 games a year. It doesn't make sense. Now, you still got value, I would think.
Sure.
So you probably can get something for him that will be on the court. I'm not going to say they're better, but they're going to be on the court. Zion, he's a pulled muscle away from 2 months. So to me, that's sensible. And I think they've got CJ McCollum on a $30 million contract, a ridiculously high contract, which is throwing money out a window. And I don't think they're going to want to deal with him as well. They got DeJounte Murray getting paying decent money too, as well. And I believe Trey Murphy's contract is up. And Trey Murphy is legit. He's real. If people don't know about him, they should. But they've got to make some choices. And that might be the smartest way to find the path. And there's always going to be somebody who wants Zion. Like a team that might think they're at a close to a championship, like the Knicks.
Sure. Yeah.
You can get a bunch of parts for him. The Knicks anymore, but you can get a bunch of parts. But for New Orleans, it starts another rebuild, which is another 3-4 years of nothing. So but again, and I want a poor ownership, bad team. And
yeah, that's the common denominator. Let me have you a play owner here for a minute, or GM. Fit aside, right? I'm just going best player. You have an opportunity to bring in Trae Young or Zion Williamson. Forget about where you're giving up. Just best player. Who you pick?
That's a great question. Boy, I wouldn't want either, honestly, but I would guess Trae Young because he'll play 70 or 80 games, 65, 70
Okay.
games.
Durability. Yep.
And if I knew they played the same amount of games, I'll take Zion every time. Zion
Okay.
affects a game. Trae Young, he's a great offensive player. You know what? What's his name? Mellow Ball is a poor man's Trae Young. Those guys, they've got to prove they can win. They really do. And I don't know if they can unless they change their game. By that, I mean defend. Now, with Zion, it's fairly easy. He goes left every time. And he's like a tank going to the basket. Nobody's getting unstoppable, really, if he's healthy. But again, if he's healthy, and even when he's healthy, he's at the point of his career. He doesn't play back to backs. They rest him if he's got a hangnail, he's out for a week. It's at that point where it's just not worth it. Boy, I would take him for one game if I knew he was healthy anytime.
Okay. But if you're the GM of the new Seattle Supersonics franchise and you get your pick, you're taking Trae Young.
I'll take either one. I'll take either one because, yeah, probably Trae Young because he'll play and we'll draw people. He's something to build while we take our draft picks and try to build a team.
Right.
Well, if we get better in 2 years, you get rid of him and get some more players.
See, GM is easy.
Yeah, it sure is. How the hell am I going to do that? Sometimes I can't even think when I'm talking.
Nice. All right. Well, that's it. You heard the buzzer go off. Our time is up. Thank you, as always, for listening. Make sure to read Steve's entire 13 Rules Random NBA Thoughts article. We'll link that wherever you're listening or watching this show to get more random thoughts after the end of the 2024-25 NBA season. Join us next week as Steve shares his thoughts on the first week of the playoffs. Please consider, as always, subscribing, liking, commenting. All that stuff matters to us, and we're grateful for all of it. Thank you, and join us next week on the Shot Clock Pod, the best 15 minutes of random NBA thoughts online anywhere. Steve, we'll talk next week.
Take care.